A young woman got a job as a maid in a millionaire's house, but when the owner saw her family photo, his heart stopped. Jenny wiped her damp hands on her apron, noting every tiny drop of oil that had left shiny marks on her tired uniform. The pizzeria on the outskirts of a small town in California, where she had worked for the past 3 years, was always bustling with life. Locals enjoyed coming by in the evenings to savor aromatic pizza and cold drinks, and Jenny greeted them each time with a tired but friendly smile. Pepperoni and 2 large colas to the 5th table, she repeated the order to the cooks and went back out into the dining area. The air conditioner, as usual, barely managed to cope with the heat, and the air was thick with the scent of dough, cheese, and tomato sauce, mingling with the stifling summer evening. Jenny was called by her friend and colleague, cashier Clara, who raised her eyebrows in a questioning gesture. "Did you take another extra shift?" Her voice was full of sympathy and confusion. "Yes," Jenny smiled, hiding her exhaustion. "I really want to take a vacation to France, to the French Riviera. So, I have to work double shifts." "And when is your trip planned?" "Very soon, just a couple of weeks left until vacation," Jenny sighed, as if trying to breathe her dream into reality. Her thoughts drifted to the shores of the Mediterranean, to the warm waves caressing the golden beaches of Nice and Cannes. She imagined strolling along the promenade, sipping a cold cocktail, and listening to the sound of the surf. The dream of such a trip didn't come from nowhere. Jenny had read many books about France, its culture and art, and films about the Riviera had turned her view of this country into a true passion. Jenny slowly turned the pages of the guidebook to the French Riviera that lay on her lap. In every word and every image, she sought inspiration, planning her perfect itinerary. Suddenly, she stopped at the section dedicated to the small, cozy cafes in the old port of Nice, where the most delicious ice cream in the city was served. Her heart raced at the thought of the first sip of coffee with a view of the yachts rocking on the waves. Every evening after work, Jenny set aside part of her modest earnings into a travel savings jar. With each passing day, the jar grew heavier, just as her dream became closer. Finally, 2 weeks before her departure, she decided to check if she had saved enough for her trip. Her heart skipped a beat when she opened the jar. There was even more money than she had anticipated. With this money, Jenny could afford not only accommodation and meals, but also a few excursions in the surrounding areas. She decided to book a tour of the vineyards in Provence and visit the famous beaches of Cannes she had read so much about. Her excitement grew with each passing day as the departure date approached. A week before her vacation, Jenny started packing her suitcase. She carefully selected outfits suitable for the hot weather of the French Riviera and didn't forget to include comfortable shoes for long walks through the ancient streets of Nice. Additionally, she packed a small first aid kit, sunscreen, and a hat, essential items for any traveler. Last to go into the suitcase were books and guidebooks. She brought not only a guide to France but also novels by French authors to read while sitting in cafes overlooking the sea. Jenny also packed a journal, in which she planned to record all her adventures so that she could relive those moments repeatedly when she returned home. Finally, the departure day arrived. Jenny felt an exciting mix of joy and anxiety as her taxi pulled up to her house in the early morning hours. Her entire future seemed filled with adventure and new discoveries. She could hardly believe that her dream was coming true. On the way to the airport, she gazed out the taxi window at the waking city, thinking about the days ahead. The streets outside passed by, already familiar and beloved, and Jenny realized that returning here would be different. She would come back with new experiences and memories that would stay with her for a lifetime. She exhaled, trying to dispel her nervousness, and smiled at her reflection in the window. Ahead was France, and she was ready to embrace it. As Jenny stepped out of the Nice airport terminal, the first thing she was greeted by was the warm Mediterranean air. It was infused with the scent of the sea and freshness, which made her smile immediately. Despite the fatigue from the long flight, she felt unusually alive and full of energy. This was a new beginning, a moment she had been waiting for so long. Jenny took a taxi to her hotel. On the way, she couldn't take her eyes off the car windows, trying to catch every detail of the city. Nice welcomed her with its sprawling palm trees, elegant Belle Epoque buildings, and wide boulevards that sparkled under the bright morning sun. The hotel turned out to be charming and cozy, with a view of a quiet street not far from the beach. After she left her things and freshened up a bit, Jenny decided not to waste any time and immediately set out to explore the city. She headed toward the famous Promenade d'Anglais, where she planned to walk along the sea to enjoy the waves and the gentle sun. Walking along the promenade was almost meditative. The sea roared nearby, and each wave crashing on the shore brought with it a sense of peace and inner calm. Jenny stopped at one of the cafes, where she ordered a cup of fragrant coffee and a croissant. Sitting across from the endless sea, she allowed herself a moment to forget everything. After her coffee, she continued her stroll and soon found herself at one of the local beaches. The sand was warm. Jenny took off her shoes and carefully stepped onto the small pebbles, feeling each one massage her feet. She walked along the shore, savoring every step and the warmth of the sun on her skin. The waves caressed her legs, and the melodic sound of the surf soothed her soul. She was already beginning to feel like a part of this enchanting place when her attention was drawn to a male voice coming from behind her. "Excuse me, is this your handkerchief?" asked the stranger with a warm smile, holding out a light silk handkerchief. Jenny turned around and saw a tall man with strong features and deep blue eyes that seemed almost as infinite as the sea before her. "Oh, yes, that's mine, thank you," she said, accepting the handkerchief. "I didn't even notice I'd lost it." "My name is Albert," he introduced himself, shaking her hand once more. Jenny felt his firm and confident handshake convey warmth. "I'm Jenny," she replied, trying to hide the excitement that suddenly enveloped her. Albert smiled and looked at the sea, then back at Jenny. His gaze was penetrating but at the same time incredibly gentle. "Did you come here alone?" he asked casually, though there was a genuine curiosity in his voice. "Yes, I'm here on vacation," Jenny answered, feeling her cheeks blush slightly. "Then let me show you some places that are usually off the beaten path." "It could be the start of your adventure here," Albert suggested, his voice sounding so convincing that Jenny immediately felt a surge of adrenaline. Unable to refuse such an offer, she nodded. They began to stroll slowly along the beach, diving into conversations about Nice, the sea, and life. Albert told her about local traditions and shared stories about famous movie stars who visited the city during the film festival. As the sun began to set, they arrived at one of the secluded seaside cafes. Albert invited Jenny to join him for dinner, and she agreed. That evening, they talked about everything under the sun, and Jenny felt an indescribable connection forming between them. She told him about her life in America, her dreams and plans, and he listened intently, never taking his eyes off her. Dinner continued with live music, and when the orchestra began to play a soft melody, Albert asked Jenny to dance. On the dance floor, under the stars and moonlight, Jenny felt her heart beat in time with the music. Albert led her so skillfully and tenderly that she forgot everything else. The evening ended with a promise to meet again. As Albert escorted her back to her hotel, Jenny felt that this day would forever remain in her memory. A new feeling, filled with the anticipation of something magical, was beginning to blossom in her heart. She didn't know what awaited her next, but she was certain that this vacation would change her life. Jenny woke up to the warm rays of the morning sun streaming into her room through the half-open curtains. Her heart was filled with a pleasant excitement at the thought of meeting Albert. Since that unforgettable night when they had first danced together under the stars, each day had been filled with new experiences and romantic adventures. Albert proved to be the perfect guide and companion. He knew Nice like the back of his hand, and every date they had was something special. He showed her places that were hidden from ordinary tourists, the winding streets of the old town, the behind-the-scenes of the market where vendors shared with them the freshest and most aromatic spices. One morning, Albert invited Jenny onto his yacht. They set sail along the coast, and the water shimmered under the bright sun like a vast mirror. Jenny would never forget how they glided past magnificent villas and lush gardens that descended right to the shore. Albert recounted stories of celebrities who had once stayed there, while the sea breeze gently enveloped them. In the evenings, they often dined at the best restaurants in Nice, where every corner seemed steeped in history and culture. Albert would order dishes that Jenny had never tried before, turning each meal into a culinary journey. They savored fresh seafood, aromatic broths, and exquisite desserts that melted in their mouths. One evening, after dinner, Albert suggested a walk along the promenade. The city was bathed in the soft light of street lamps, and the music from nearby cafes made the atmosphere even more romantic. They walked hand in hand, and Jenny felt each of his touches sending waves of warmth and serenity through her soul. When they stopped to admire the view of the illuminated harbor, Albert suddenly turned to her, looking straight into her eyes, and said, "Jenny, I can't put into words how happy I've been these days. You've brought so much light and joy into my life. I will never forget these moments with you." Jenny felt her eyes fill with tears of joy and gratitude. She nestled close to him, and they kissed under the starry sky, surrounded by the magic of the French night. Each new day with Albert felt like a gift from fate, and she could no longer imagine her life without these moments. What had started as a simple trip had turned into an exhilarating adventure full of passion, new discoveries, and perhaps the beginning of something incredibly significant. That evening promised to be like all the previous ones, full of romantic moments and new experiences. Jenny and Albert set off for one of the most picturesque areas of Nice, where he had reserved a table at a restaurant known for its breathtaking views of the bay and exquisite cuisine. Throughout dinner, they discussed a variety of topics, from art to history, and Jenny was impressed by the depth of Albert's knowledge and his ability to hold a conversation. She was beginning to grow accustomed to his company, finding in it not only comfort but also inspiration. Everything seemed perfect, and she felt that this evening would be special. After dinner, Albert suggested taking a walk on the terrace that overlooked the sea. The gentle evening breeze played with their hair as the stars began to light up the sky, one by one. They walked in silence, enjoying each other's closeness and the sound of the waves. When they stopped to admire the view of nighttime Nice, Albert suddenly fell silent and stared at the sea with an unusual seriousness. Jenny looked at him with some concern, waiting for him to say something. "Jenny, there's something I need to tell you," he began, his voice sounding uncertain. "It might change your perception of me, but I hope you'll understand." She nodded silently, feeling her heart beat faster in anticipation. "I'm not just a visitor enjoying himself in Nice," Albert continued, carefully choosing his words. "I'm a hereditary prince and the Prince of Monaco, Albert II." Jenny froze, trying to process what she had just heard. A prince? The Prince of Monaco? She couldn't believe that the person she had spent the past few weeks with was one of the most famous people in Europe. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" Her voice trembled with a mix of surprise and excitement. "I wanted you to get to know me as an ordinary person," he replied. "Not as a prince, but as Albert, who can laugh, cry, and love. I didn't want my status to affect our relationship." Jenny looked at him, and in his eyes, she saw sincerity and hope. Despite the shock, she felt her initial excitement gradually giving way to understanding and affection. "I'm glad you told me," she said finally, taking his hands. "It doesn't change how I feel about you. In fact, I respect your desire to be genuine with me." Albert smiled and let out a relieved sigh. They resumed looking at the sea, now holding hands. What had started as a casual acquaintance had grown into a deep connection, built on mutual trust and respect, which they both hoped would withstand any challenges. The trip to Nice left an indelible mark on Jenny's soul. Despite all the joy and excitement the days with Albert had brought her, she felt torn between two worlds as the plane touched down in California. Her soul was filled with conflicting emotions. On one hand, there were friends, work, and her familiar life waiting for her at home, and on the other, there was a longing for the magical Monaco, for Albert, and for their shared adventures. The first few days after her return were filled with mundane concerns. Jenny tried to keep herself occupied with work at the pizzeria, meeting friends, and planning for the future. But in every free moment, she found herself mentally drifting back to the days she spent on the French Riviera. Weeks passed, and Jenny began to notice that she felt unusually exhausted. At first, she attributed it to jet lag and emotional overload from the trip, but the fatigue persisted, and she also began experiencing morning sickness. Finally, deciding it was time to get to the bottom of her condition, she bought a pregnancy test. Jenny would never forget the moment she stood in the bathroom, holding the test, which quickly displayed 2 bright pink lines. She was in shock. Her heart raced, and she was overwhelmed with a mix of incredible joy and fear. Pregnant? With Albert's child? A whirlwind of thoughts started spinning in her head. How would she tell him? How would this change their relationship? That same day, Jenny wrote to Albert. She chose her words carefully, trying to convey the depth of her feelings and the significance of the moment. After sending the message, she couldn't tear herself away from her phone for hours, waiting for a response. But no response came. Days turned into weeks, and all her messages remained unanswered. Jenny felt her heart breaking from the uncertainty and fear of the future. Realizing that she might be left alone and have to raise the child by herself, Jenny decided she needed to be strong not only for herself, but also for her future baby. She began preparing for her new role as a mother, reading books on parenting, attending prenatal classes, and slowly adjusting her home and life for the arrival of the new family member. She often thought about Albert, the days they spent together, and that magical night under the stars. Every time she recalled his words of love and promises, she felt a pang of sadness. But she knew that now she would have a new love, her child, to whom she promised to give the very best she could. A new chapter in Jenny's life began, motherhood. The birth of her daughter Jasmine brought her both incredible joy and new, unforeseen challenges. The unexpected silence from Albert, who never responded to her messages, left her completely alone, confronting the reality of single parenthood. Jasmine was a sweet and cheerful child, but the demands of motherhood proved to be a heavy burden for Jenny, who continued to work at the pizzeria to support herself and her daughter. Fatigue built up like a snowball, and the days began to blend together: work, caring for Jasmine, short hours of sleep, and then it all started again. Problems began when Jasmine started kindergarten. Frequent colds and the need to leave work suddenly to pick up her daughter when she was feeling unwell began to cause dissatisfaction with her employer. Jenny had to face the harsh reality: she needed a more flexible job to be able to be with Jasmine when necessary. She decided to change careers and became a real estate agent. This job offered a more flexible schedule and the potential to earn more, which was important for a young mother. However, the new career also came with its demands. Jenny had to spend a lot of time away from home, inspecting properties and meeting clients, which meant she often had to leave Jasmine in the care of temporary nannies. The emotional strain of this lifestyle began to take its toll on Jenny. She felt guilty for not being able to spend as much time with Jasmine as she wanted. Every evening, as she tucked her daughter into bed, she promised herself and Jasmine that tomorrow they would play more, smile more, and worry less. But the days flowed through her fingers like water, and each evening Jenny fell into bed exhausted and overwhelmed with a sense of inadequacy. Occasionally, in moments of despair, Jenny would turn to old letters and photographs from her time in Nice, reminiscing about the bright days with Albert. These memories brought her comfort, reminding her of a time when she felt loved and happy. But at the same time, they reminded her of lost dreams and a changed life. Despite all the hardships, Jenny did not give up. She knew her primary task was to provide Jasmine with care and love. She told her daughter about France, their roots, and Albert, trying to keep the good in her heart. In these stories, Jenny found the strength to keep going, believing that one day their lives would improve. Jasmine gradually stopped being the small child Jenny used to carry in her arms. Now she was a growing girl who was increasingly aware of the difficulties her mother faced every day. Not a day went by without Jasmine noticing the fatigue in Jenny's eyes or hearing her sighs in the evening when she thought her daughter was already asleep. "Mom, I want to help," Jasmine said one day while they were doing homework. Jenny smiled, grateful for her daughter's concern, but a sense of worry began to grow in her heart. She didn't want Jasmine to feel like she had to take on the burden of adult life. "You're already helping by doing well in school," she replied, trying to ease her daughter's burden. But Jasmine insisted. "I can do more. Maybe I could start walking the neighbor's dogs or help out at the corner store," she suggested, and Jenny realized that her little girl was growing up faster than she had thought. Within a week, Jasmine had already started earning money by walking dogs and helping at the local cafe, setting up chairs and trays after school. Every evening she came home with small amounts of money, which she immediately gave to her mother. "This is for us, Mom, so you can rest a little," she would say, and Jenny felt every time that it was becoming hard for her to hold back tears. Seeing Jasmine's effort to help, Jenny decided her daughter deserved more than a life of constant struggle. She began working even harder to save enough money to send Jasmine to a summer camp where she could take a break from daily worries and simply enjoy her childhood. When summer came and Jasmine went off to camp, Jenny felt lonely without her daughter's chatter and constant movement around the house. But she knew that Jasmine was spending her time playing and laughing with other children, and that gave her strength. On the rare days when Jasmine called home from camp, her voice sounded cheerful and happy. She talked about new friends, the sea, sports games, and learning to swim. Jenny listened and smiled, feeling that each word from Jasmine filled her home with light. Those summer weeks showed Jenny that, despite all the hardships, she and Jasmine could find their way to happiness. They were both strong, and although the path ahead seemed challenging, Jenny knew they would manage. She was ready for new challenges because now she had hope, and its name was Jasmine. Jasmine had become a teenager, and each day her life was filled with new ideas and dreams. She had become more independent and began looking for ways to help her mother even more while expanding her horizons. On that special day, when Jasmine was sitting in the school library with her friend Lisa, they were discussing a future that seemed so uncertain and exciting. Lisa, always full of enthusiasm and adventurous ideas, suddenly suggested, "Why don't we go work abroad for the summer? My aunt works at a staffing agency, and they often look for young people for temporary jobs in Europe. We could earn money and see the world at the same time." Jasmine was initially surprised, then her heart raced in anticipation of the adventure. But right after the excitement came a wave of doubts. How could she leave her mother alone? Yet, at the same time, she understood that this could be a chance to change their lives for the better. "I don't know, Lisa," she mumbled. "It's a big step. There's a lot to consider." "Think about it, Jazz," Lisa insisted. "It's not just a trip, it's a chance to earn money and help our families." That evening at home, during dinner, Jasmine unexpectedly brought up the topic. "Mom, what would you say if I went abroad for the summer to work?" Jasmine started uncertainly. Jenny looked at her daughter, surprised and a little frightened. "Abroad?" she repeated. "It's far away, Jasmine. It's serious. Are you sure?" Jasmine took her mother's hands in hers. "I think it could help us. I could earn money, and we could improve our lives a little. I want to help you more, Mom." Jenny looked at her daughter, and her heart swelled with pride. Jasmine had grown into a smart and determined young woman who wanted to take responsibility and find ways to solve their shared problems. "If you really want to do this, and if you think it's the right thing, I'll support you," she finally said, feeling tears welling up in her eyes. The decision was made, and the following weeks Jasmine and Lisa spent preparing. They filled out all the necessary paperwork, got recommendations, and started planning their summer adventure, which they hoped would be the first step towards a better future for themselves and their families. Jasmine's heart raced as the plane touched down on the runway at Nice Airport. The sun had begun to set, painting the sky in warm shades of pink and gold. She looked out the window, anxious and excited for the new adventures. Lisa, sitting beside her, seemed much calmer and more collected. "We're here, Jazz. I can't believe we actually did it," Lisa exclaimed, grinning widely. After going through passport control and collecting their luggage, the girls headed to the exit, where a representative from the staffing agency was already waiting for them. An energetic middle-aged woman with a sign bearing their names greeted them with a joyful smile. "Welcome to France. I'm Marie, and I'll be your coordinator for the time being." Introducing herself, she helped them with their luggage and escorted them to the car. The drive to Monaco was filled with breathtaking views of the Mediterranean Sea and luxurious villas stretching along the coastline. Marie talked about the city and what awaited them in the coming weeks. With each passing mile, Jasmine felt more and more that her life was about to change forever. Upon arriving in Monaco, they were settled into a small but cozy apartment that would be their home for the summer. The apartment was in a quiet area, and from the balcony, there was a view of narrow, winding streets and small cafes. The next morning marked the beginning of their first work shift. Jasmine and Lisa were assigned to one of the luxurious hotels, where they were to work as maids. Despite the initial nerves and unfamiliarity with the job, the girls quickly adapted. They were trained in the basics: how to properly clean rooms, prepare them for guests, and interact with hotel visitors. The work was hard, but each day spent in Monaco brought new experiences and encounters. Jasmine felt her skills improving and her confidence growing with each passing day. In their free time, the girls explored the city, visiting its historic landmarks, museums, and markets. One evening, while strolling along the seaside promenade, Jasmine stopped to admire the view of the yachts and the sea. The air was filled with the briny scent of the ocean, and the sound of the waves was soothing to her soul. She felt that despite all the challenges and difficulties, she was on the right path. This summer promised to be the beginning of something big and important in her life. That day, Jasmine, as usual, started her shift in one of the most luxurious mansions rented by the hotel for its VIP guests. Working as a maid in Monaco was demanding, but each new day brought something different, and she gradually adapted to the rhythm of this life. While cleaning one of the main bedrooms, Jasmine decided to rummage through her purse to make sure she hadn't lost her documents. At that moment, an old photograph fell out of her purse, showing her and her mother. It was one of the few photos of them together, and she cherished it deeply. As she bent down to pick up the photograph, a man entered the room silently. Jasmine hurriedly picked up the photo, but couldn't hide it before their eyes met. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to startle you," she began, but the man, gray-haired, tall, with deep wrinkles around his eyes, just silently stared at the photograph in her hands. "Where did you get this?" His voice trembled, as if a storm was raging in his chest. "This is my mom and me," Jasmine replied slowly, feeling the air in the room grow heavier. "It's one of our last photos together." The man slowly approached and looked closely at the picture. Jasmine could see his eyes fill with tears and how he struggled to swallow, trying to control his emotions. "I knew your mother," he said quietly, his voice barely audible and shaking. "I knew her very well. I'm your father, Jasmine." These words struck her like a bolt from the blue. The world around her seemed to freeze, and she could hardly believe that this was happening. "Why? Why did you leave? Why never try to find us?" The words escaped her almost involuntarily. The man, Albert, as she now knew his name, slowly sat down on the edge of the bed, still holding the photograph. "I thought it would be better for everyone. I thought I could protect you, but I was wrong. I'm so sorry for the pain I caused you." His voice was full of regret and longing. Jasmine stood still, trying to piece together the fragments of her shattered history. Tears gathered in her eyes, but deep inside, something like forgiveness began to stir. She didn't know what would come next, but she felt that this moment would change her life forever. After the shocking revelation that Albert was her father, Jasmine felt as if she were caught in a whirlwind of emotions. She stood in the same bedroom, frozen in place, while Albert sat with his head bowed, holding the photograph. "Why?" Jasmine repeated, her voice trembling with a mix of anger, sadness, and disappointment. "Why did you never try to find out how we were living?" Albert looked up, his gaze full of pain. He slowly stood, carefully placed the photograph on the table, and addressed Jasmine. "I knew the day would come when I would have to answer these questions," he began, sighing deeply. "When I met your mother, I wasn't ready for a serious relationship. I was living through fleeting connections and affairs, but when I learned about the pregnancy, my heart was torn apart. Jasmine listened, trying to suppress the wave of rising anger. Albert stepped forward, trying to say something, but Jasmine raised her hand, stopping him. My whole life I felt like something was missing. And Mom, she became so withdrawn. You destroyed her life, and then mine. Tears began to roll down her cheeks, but she quickly wiped them away. Albert lowered his eyes, his face etched with deep sorrow. I didn't expect forgiveness, Jasmine, he said quietly. I will always regret my decisions. But I am here now, and I want to try to make amends where I can. I don't want to hide or run from responsibility anymore. Jasmine silently looked at him, trying to understand his words. She knew this conversation was only the beginning of a long and complicated path, perhaps a path to healing, or maybe just to new disappointments. I will give you time, he continued. I will be here when you want to talk, when you are ready. Left alone in the room, Jasmine felt the burden on her shoulders lighten slightly. She wasn't ready to forgive him completely, but Albert's acknowledgement and his desire to make amends gave her hope that perhaps, in the future, her life could become a bit easier. After the tumultuous meeting with Albert, Jasmine spent several days immersed in reflection. Questions about the past, which had remained unanswered for so long, now seemed more pressing. She decided that she needed to get definitive confirmation of their connection in order to move forward, regardless of the outcome. After much contemplation, Jasmine called Albert and suggested they meet. They agreed to see each other at a cafe near her workplace. When she approached the table where he was already sitting, hope was evident in his eyes. I'm glad you came, Jasmine, he said quietly as she sat down across from him. I've thought about everything, she began, trying to remain calm. And I've decided that we need to do a DNA test. It will help me, both of us, figure everything out. Albert nodded, his face remaining impassive. I agree, Jasmine. I want you to be certain. I'll arrange everything. The process of arranging the test was swift. Albert contacted the clinic, and soon Jasmine found herself there, watching as the nurse took samples for analysis. The same procedure was done with Albert. All that was left was to wait for the results, which were expected to come in a few days. Jasmine felt a mix of relief and anxiety. These days of waiting became a time for her to reflect on the future and how the news might change her life. She thought about her mother, how this news might affect their relationship, and her own feelings towards Albert. Finally, the day of the results arrived. Jasmine and Albert met again at the clinic to learn the truth together. The doctor handed them an envelope, and Albert suggested Jasmine open it first. Her hands trembled as she tore open the paper and pulled out the sheet with the results. She read the conclusion slowly, which confirmed their genetic connection. Albert was her father. For a moment, she couldn't find the words. Emotions overwhelmed her, and tears involuntarily filled her eyes. Albert also looked at the document, his face showing both relief and sadness. Jasmine, he began, but she raised her hand, stopping him. Give me time, please, she whispered. I need to process all of this. They parted ways at the clinic doors, each with their own thoughts about the future. Jasmine knew that difficult conversations and possibly new beginnings lay ahead. But now, with the truth revealed, she felt she could start rebuilding her life, now fully aware of the reality. After days filled with mixed feelings and long reflections, Jasmine began to slowly accept her new reality. She was now the daughter of Albert, the Prince of Monaco, which opened up a completely new world of possibilities and challenges for her. The acknowledgement of paternity changed her status, and now her life had become a matter of public interest. Albert, eager to make amends for past mistakes, invited Jasmine to spend time in Monaco to learn more about the life she could lead. Jasmine, cautiously accepting his offer, was poised to explore this new chapter of her life. At first, Jasmine found it challenging to adjust to the constant attention from the media and the public. Every step she took seemed to be under scrutiny, and every word she spoke was analyzed. However, with Albert's and his family's support, she began to adapt to this new way of life. Albert introduced her to the local elite at several official events, where Jasmine quickly made friends among other aristocrats. He also provided her with the opportunity to study at one of Europe's most prestigious universities, so she could continue her education in a field that interested her. Soon after her move, Jasmine began working at one of the charitable organizations funded by the princely family. Working in charity gave her a sense of purpose and the chance to contribute to society, which she enjoyed. She started developing programs to support single mothers, drawing inspiration from her own childhood and her mother's experiences. Among her new acquaintances, Jasmine met Leon, a young diplomat who showed her that sincerity and kindness could exist even in the highest circles of society. Their friendship quickly evolved into something more, and Jasmine felt hope for happiness rekindling in her heart. Despite the stress of her new life, Jasmine learned to find moments of joy and fulfillment. She dedicated time not only to her new responsibilities, but also to traveling with Leon, exploring the beauty of Europe and venturing beyond its borders. In this chapter of her life, Jasmine truly felt that she was starting a new path. She was grateful for the opportunities that had opened up to her, but above all, she cherished the peace she had found in her heart and the new, genuine relationship she had built with her father, based on understanding, respect, and ultimately, forgiveness. At one evening reception, where Jasmine felt much more confident among the glittering crowd, she encountered an old friend of Albert's, Duke Moreau, known for his knowledge of Monaco's history. During a conversation about the principality's past, the Duke inadvertently mentioned an ancient curse said to have been placed on the Grimaldi dynasty. Jasmine became intrigued by the story and asked him to elaborate. The Duke, seeing her interest, began to narrate. "Oh, it's an old story surrounded by myths and legends, but it is said that in the 13th century, one of the mistresses of the first Prince Grimaldi, Ranieri, cursed him and his entire dynasty for betrayal. The legend holds that no Grimaldi will find happiness in marriage, and their love affairs will always be tainted by tragedies and scandals." The Duke's words sent a shiver down Jasmine's spine. She recalled the story of her parents, secretive and full of suffering. "And although many consider it just an old tale," continued the Duke, "some events in our history do make one think. For example, the tragic fate of Grace Kelly or the recent scandals surrounding the current prince." Returning home, Jasmine couldn't shake her thoughts about the curse. She wondered how much fate could be determined by old stories and myths. In her room, sitting by the window, she gazed at the stars and pondered her future. Deciding that she could not let old legends dictate her life, Jasmine resolved to have an open conversation with her father about her concerns. The next day, they met in his office, where she shared her reflections and fears. Albert listened attentively, his face showing understanding and sympathy. "I know about this legend," he began softly. "And perhaps there is something to it. But I believe that each of us is free to choose our own path. We can learn from past mistakes and strive for a better future, regardless of ancient curses." Jasmine felt her anxiety gradually easing. Her father added, "You are my daughter, and you bring light into this house. It doesn't matter what old legends say. We shape our own destiny every day. And I will be here to support you, no matter what." The realization that she was not alone, that she had a family who supported and loved her, gave Jasmine strength. She decided that she would live a full life, pursuing happiness and love regardless of any curses. That night became a turning point in her life, the beginning of a new chapter in which she would decide her own path. With this newfound resolve, Jasmine actively engaged in life in Monaco. She attended official events and meetings, which gave her confidence in interacting with high society. In every action she took, there was a thirst for change and a desire to contribute to the principality's welfare. Albert II, seeing his daughter's passion and enthusiasm, introduced her to the board of several charitable foundations under the princely house's patronage. Jasmine accepted these responsibilities with pride and seriousness, understanding that through these platforms she could achieve many of her ambitions to improve life in Monaco and beyond. In her personal life, Jasmine also experienced changes. Her relationship with Leon, which had started modestly and casually, quickly grew into something much more significant. Leon supported her in all her endeavors, often accompanying her to various events and even helping with charitable projects. His presence made her life brighter and richer. As promised, Albert spent many hours teaching Jasmine about the workings of state affairs. These moments brought them closer together, and Jasmine truly began to feel the deep connection with her father that had been missing during her childhood. Albert, in turn, felt profound satisfaction in being able to pass on his knowledge and experience to the daughter he had inadvertently neglected for so many years. Soon, Albert married Charlene, a professional swimmer who had represented South Africa in the Olympics and participated in many other competitions. They had 2 children. At the christening of Prince Jacques and Princess Gabriella, Jasmine felt like a full member of the princely family. She saw Jacques and Gabriella as her younger brother and sister, often spending time with them, teaching them, and genuinely loving them. This sense of family attachment was new to Jasmine, but she cherished every moment spent with her family. After many years of study and work, Jasmine began to realize the importance of balancing personal life and responsibilities. She understood that every decision, every step in life was not just a matter of duty, but also an opportunity for personal happiness. It was in this new understanding that Jasmine found her true strength and independence, ready to look to the future with hope and optimism. As Jasmine swiftly integrated into the life of the Monaco court, Jenny faced the need to redefine her own place in this new world that had unexpectedly opened up before her. Albert's recognition made Jenny a notable figure in society, and many were interested in her personality and past. At first, she felt overwhelmed by this attention, but soon found a way to use her newfound visibility to pursue long-held ambitions. She began working on creating a charitable foundation to help single mothers, drawing from her own experience. Together with her daughter, Jenny traveled extensively, interacting with various people, studying societal issues and needs, which only strengthened her desire to help others. Her projects received support and attention, and the charitable foundation began to actively grow. Jenny became a recognized expert in social work, and her opinions were valued both in America, Monaco, and beyond. In her personal life, Jenny also found stability. After all the trials and disappointments of the past, she was ready to open her heart to new relationships. During one of her trips, she met Mark, a journalist from France who was covering one of her charity events. A warm friendship quickly developed between them, which over time grew into a deep affection. Mark focused not on her status, but on her sincerity and her desire to make the world a better place, which was invaluable to her. Jenny and Mark decided to live together, merging their lives not through official marriage, but through shared goals and interests. They traveled, worked, and created joint projects, helping those in need. One beautiful day, standing on the balcony of her home and watching the sunset, Jenny realized how much had changed. From the hardships of loneliness and struggle to a life full of meaning and happiness, her journey had not been easy, but thanks to the new relationships and opportunities fate had provided her, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. Closing her eyes, she breathed in the cool air, and the words Jasmine had spoken at one of the recent events echoed in her ears. No curse can alter our desire to love and be loved, to do good and receive it from the world. These words had become a beacon for Jenny, guiding her through all the trials to a new chapter of her life, full of hope and